I covered my ears and closed my eyes. I couldn't listen to my parents' lectures for one more second. They say the same thing every day. I'm sick of it and can't take it anymore. So I snapped and shouted at them for the first time in my life. They were shocked. But did Mom and Dad really think that I would never talk back? After that, I ran to my room and locked myself in. The only one who ever supports me is Nate, my boyfriend, who I'm head over heels in love with. Only my parents don't understand how I can love him because we're from different social classes. I'm the daughter of millionaires, and he's a guy from an ordinary family. His father is a firefighter, and his mother works in a flower shop. When my parents found out about my relationship, they were happy because despite our wealth, I grew up as a very withdrawn teenager. Because of this, I didn't have any close friends. The other rich kids were only interested in money and clothes. They constantly tried to stand out, and I was always the black sheep around them. And so I had a dream, to find a soulmate who would accept me for who I am. A famous actor came to our city, who often appeared in a drama. I just adore him. But unfortunately, there were so many people that I couldn't even see him. I stood up on my tiptoes, but it didn't help. Then a guy invited me to sit on his neck so that I could see better. I agreed. Believe it or not, he kept me like that for an hour and a half, even though we'd just met. Yep, that's my boyfriend Nate, a real gentleman, a very polite, caring, and kind guy. As soon as we met and talked a little, I immediately realized that he's my soulmate. I can chat with him for hours and share my secrets and problems. Nate's the only person my natural stiffness goes away with. Around him, I can just be myself. So we first became friends, and then we started dating. When I fell in love with Nate, I changed for the better. My parents, who hadn't noticed before, started to notice once they saw how different I was. They immediately guessed that I was dating someone and asked me to invite my boyfriend to dinner. Finally, they were starting to show an interest in me. I happily invited Nate to my place, but I wish I hadn't. That's when everything went wrong. My name is Emily, and this is my story about how my parents forbade me to date a guy because he comes from a poor family. Perhaps someone in my story will recognize themselves because I'm probably not the only one who's dealt with this kind of problem. When Nate came to dinner, they immediately knew he wasn't rich. It was obvious because he wasn't wearing branded clothes. He had the most standard smartphone, and he just acted like a normal guy instead of a rich guy. My parents started bombarding him with uncomfortable questions. Where does he live? How much does his family earn? What are his plans for the future? But Nate wasn't embarrassed, and he answered honestly. After dinner, my parents immediately told me this guy wasn't suitable for me. He doesn't even have the money to take you to a restaurant. Mom was indignant. I replied that I was fine with him and without restaurants, but my answer couldn't convince them. Then they began to develop a plan against Nate. They began to invite their partners to visit with their sons every evening, hoping I would get along with someone from their circle. But those rich guys weren't interested in anything except money, expensive cars, and beautiful girls. They tried to make a move on me, but I rejected everyone. And one time, it even caused problems for one of my parents' business relationships. Because of my refusal, the father of the offended guy didn't sign a contract with my parents. And as a result, they lost several $1 million. Who do you think was to blame? Of course, I was. They demanded that I talk to that guy immediately and agree to date him. Oh, come on. You won't be poor just because you lost out on a couple million, I answered. Then I found out they were offering Nate a large sum of money so that he would never see me again. At first, it was $100,000, and then a whole $1 million. For Nate's family, this is an incredible amount of money. But he refused them, and then told me about the whole unpleasant episode. After that, I didn't speak to my parents for several days, but they still didn't stop. Then, every night, they talked my ear off about how I couldn't date a poor person anymore and dishonor our family. Where have you ever seen the daughter of a millionaire dating a poor man? They brought me to tears, and once even to hysteria. and only Nate supported me. He was worried about our relationship, but I said that everything would be okay because he was important to me, not my parents' opinions. However, Mom and Dad sank to a new level. One day, Nate showed up to a date looking very depressed, and I asked what had happened. He replied that his parents had gotten fired. Well, of course, it wasn't hard to guess who did it. The fact is that my parents are very influential people, not only in the city, but also in the country. So it's not a problem for them to deprive someone of a job. They didn't even hide that they were behind it. My dad said that if I broke up with Nate, then his family would be able to earn money again. But how could they not understand that I am happy with him? After all, he is the only person who's by my side when they're not in town. And only Nate gives me support and love. I disagreed and told my boyfriend everything. He replied that there must be a way out. However, after this conversation, Nate suddenly disappeared. He didn't answer my calls, didn't message me, didn't show up at school. I was worried sick. And then I thought that he decided to leave me. Well, it was the only way his parents could find work. And I felt very sad and insulted. I was ready to go to great lengths for him, but he gave up at the first hurdle. In a fit of emotion, I went to his house, but no one came to the door. Apparently, they weren't home. Well, okay, I could wait. However, they didn't show up after an hour, or 2, or even 3. And then I got really scared. What if something happened to Nate? As it turned out, I was right. My father had a man who got him the information he needed. Sometimes he worked for my mother and me. I asked him to find out where Nate is now with his family, and the answer shocked me. They were all in the hospital, in serious condition after a car accident. From this news, my legs gave way and tears flowed from my eyes. I asked for the address of the hospital and immediately went there, but I wasn't allowed into their ward. I didn't want to leave, so I sat down in the hallway and waited for at least some news. And at that time, there were 1,000 thoughts in my head about the accident. I came to the conclusion that it wasn't an accident. Well, of course. My parents were against our relationship, and so they decided to get rid of Nate. Oh no. Have I really lived all these years with merciless and insensitive killers? This guess made me uneasy, and I decided to go home to find out everything. The whole area must have heard my screams. I accused my parents of contract murder, called them names, and didn't want to listen to anything they had to say. A couple of hours later, after I calmed down, my father called me into his office to talk. They were able to discuss everything almost calmly. He said he would never have taken such terrible measures. I could hardly believe it, but my dad was able to convince me. He expressed his sympathy, but his mind was made up. I needed to break up with Nate. I freaked out. How could he say that to me at such a difficult time? He was on the brink of death, and I had to think about breaking up with him? Did my dad really have no compassion? Several days passed in a daze for me, and then the long-awaited call from the hospital came. Nate and his parents had regained consciousness, and I immediately went to see them. At the same time, it became clear who was responsible for the accident. A drunken man who was driving his car in the oncoming lane. But despite everything, Nate was happy that he and his family were able to survive, and I was doubly happy. I went to his hospital every day and brought fruit. And then he was discharged, and we spent all our free time together. Only our joy didn't last long. His parents couldn't find a job. Even Nate was having trouble finding work. They had to sell things to pay off the loan. I asked my parents to leave the family alone, but they were unshakable, seeing how hard it was for Nate's family. I nevertheless decided to take an extra step, to break up with him. It was useless to oppose my parents. They will never give up when they've made a decision. In the days that followed, I fell into an endless depression. I didn't leave my room, didn't eat anything. I just cried and looked at photos of Nate and me. I didn't want to see anyone, especially my parents, who wouldn't leave me alone. They suddenly started caring about me. Ridiculous. Where had they been all my life? Why did they only start caring about me now? It'd be better if Mom and Dad had just kept thinking about nothing but work. Nate constantly wrote and called, and I could hardly keep myself from answering. I had to block him everywhere. It was very hard, but I was the one to suffer, not him and his family. Plus, I learned that they'd been able to go back to work. That was a little bit of good news. I thought my personal nightmare would never end, but I was wrong. One night, I woke up to the terrible smell of burning. Only a few minutes later, it dawned on me that our house was on fire. My parents and I managed to get out, and soon the firemen arrived, but our cat Salvador was still inside. Mom tearfully asked the firefighter to save him, and he, a real hero, went into the burning house. He was absent for several long minutes, and one of the firefighters said that most likely he was surrounded by fire. I got scared. I wanted to rush into the flames to help the firefighter, as well as save Salvador. When the roof started to collapse, I screamed and covered my face with my hands. Tears flowed down my throat. Were they really dead? But soon the firefighter got out with Salvador in his arms. Mom immediately hugged him and then the cat. And when the firefighter took off his helmet, I was shocked. This hero turned out to be Nate's father. I immediately hugged him and thanked him for saving our pet. It took a long time to put the fire out. We only left for the hotel in the morning to recover at least a little. In the hotel room, I told him that the firefighter was Nate's father. Mom was so moved that she cried and said that they were wonderful people. So I can date Nate again? And my parents finally gave me the go-ahead. Since then, they have no longer meddled in our relationship. And Nate and I, once we cleared everything up, are together again. Have your parents ever forbidden you from dating anyone? Write your answers in the comments, like the video, and share it with your friends.